Welcome to the CTOx Podcast. This is the place to be if you're a technology leader navigating the fractional CTO landscape. I'm Marissa Brassfield, joined by Lior Weinstein, the visionary behind CTOx.
Here, we cut through the noise to deliver actionable insights for CTOs at every stage, whether you're looking at your first five-figure client or actively building systems to scale.
That's right. You'll learn principles, not just tactics, to transform your technical expertise into a thriving fractional practice. Let's dig in. Welcome back to the CTOx Podcast. We talk a lot about the phrase fractional, and fractional might sound new, but it's been hiding in plain sight. You already trust some of your most sensitive and high-stakes decisions to fractional professionals. You just may not call them that. So today we're going to unpack how to use this mindset to better structure your business and help your prospective clients make sense about hiring a fractional CTO. Lior, welcome back. It's always so great to be with you.
Love being here.
So I've heard you say, Lior, that the term fractional defines a financial relationship, not the quality or the depth of leadership. I'd love if you could kick off by unpacking that.
You know, with many businesses, when they first hear the term fractional, they go to this headspace of part-time. And in their mind, as properly makes sense, part-time is not as effective as full-time, right? That's why you hire somebody part because you only need them part-time and they're doing less work because they're using less time than somebody full-time. In our spaces and in executive leadership, when we talk about the word fractional, I mean, we're still referring to time, but what we're trying to was time on the executive side. But the reason this less time is required is because not as many strategic decisions need to be made on the business side, which is really what an executive leader does. An executive leader, assuming the organization is structured correctly and the work is structured correctly, they're not doing the work, right? They're leading the work, they're guiding the work, they're making sure the work is set according to different standards. They're course correcting, they're coordinating, orchestrating, but they're not actually doing the work. Their hands are not on the keyboard if it's the technology side, and so on. So for a certain kind of complexity of a business, you just don't need somebody with decades of experience where they have a lot of wisdom. So they can integrate a lot of information very quickly and they can make a decision very effectively. And for that reason, you don't really want to pay them to not make decisions, which is really what happens with a lot of full-time roles in small to mid-sized companies. They're there, and I'm not saying anybody's not doing honest work, but I'm certainly calling out that in many cases it's not efficient. So the fact that their time is full and they're thinking about they and the team and the executives and everybody thinks about a 40-hour work week, which kind of got stamped, in the culture zeitgeist, that's what they need to fill. They need to clock in at 9, leave at 4 or 5, whatever that is. And if they're not doing that, they're not doing enough work. But through the lens of, is this effective? Right? Is my work effective? Am I making effective me? Am I creating the effect? Am I actually creating the result that I want? The time lens is irrelevant. Like, don't you want to get the same result for less time? And in that context, shouldn't the business enjoy the economic benefit of somebody spending less time to create the same result, which is really what this entire movement about fractional leadership allows. It basically brings in executives that can make the decisions, don't need as much time to make these decisions because they have all the wisdom, from doing decades of work. And they're willing to say, yeah, I'm willing to work with you and a few other businesses. So you don't have to carry the financial burden of a full-time person like me and watch and basically pay me some time to watch paint dry, or like I say, like just kind of watching the cake bake.
Right. And two of the departments where we already see this play out is legal and finance. I mean, you've worked with, seen, advised so many businesses. Do most small businesses hire a full-time general counsel or a CPA on their payroll?
Yeah, very rarely. And the ones that do should probably stop. And this is one of these things where when I talk to CEOs and entrepreneurs, and for some of them to push back about the fractional because they have this sense that no, an executive needs to work for me full time, and if they're not full time, they're not effective, and so on and so forth. And I asked them, what if I challenge you and say, you already have fractional executives, fractional leaders, and fractional decision makers in your company. And not only they are making decisions with some of your most important consequences of your business and some of your most sensitive data. And naturally they're like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, yeah. Your CPA, is he on full-time payroll? Is that what's happening? Is your lawyer that creates the contracts, reviews the contracts, sometimes, operates on your behalf, are they on a full-time retainer? And, 98 out of 100 times the answer is no. And then I try to reflect back to them and understand, don't you think legal is super important for your business? Don't you think your taxes and your money is super important for your business? And that's a good key difference between a CPA and a bookkeeper. The bookkeeper should be there, right? Every day, every week, depending on the kind of business, right? Every month, and make sure things are reconciled and things are categorized properly and bills are getting paid out in time and so on. But the CPA is the strategy, right? Like how to classify for taxes, how to do tax planning, how to change the cash flow so it hits one way or another. That's why fractional CFO is the most common fractional in our space. You just don't need to make those decisions every day. Because you don't need to make those decisions every day, they have no reason to be there every day and get paid every single day. So that is a very common thing that's more intuitive for people. It's like, oh yeah, of course, I don't have my counsel on as a permanent retainer. I don't have my CPA, even though they're committed to them. They can be your CPA for decades, and they can be your lawyer for decades. They're trusted, long, great relationships, and they're fractional. So that's different. For example, we spoke about in other episodes between interim, like full-time, temporary, and also the sense that sometimes fractional is coming in for a project, right? If you trust your lawyer, he's going to be your lawyer. They're going to be your lawyer for years. If you trust your CPA, she's going to be your CPA for years. So having basically a similar mindset to the other executive positions in the company and understanding that depending on the complexity of your business, decisions don't need to be made every day and information doesn't need to get integrated every day. Ergo, there's no reason to pay somebody every day.
Why do you think that people intuitively trust fractional legal or financial advice, but then hesitate with tech leadership?
I think part of it is when it's the dynamics of the profession, meaning lawyers and CPAs think about themselves as a professional service, giving professional services and creating those practices. And from day one, they're just assuming they're going to have multiple clients. And because they're assuming they're going to have multiple clients, then people that hire them look at themselves as clients as opposed to employers, right, or boss. And so I think a lot of it is identity of the service provider, like how they look at themselves. Like, for example, when people come to me now, I'm like, full-time job is not even a conversation with me. I just don't look at it like that. No, it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how big your opportunity is. Because of an identity thing. I have a certain way of how I perceive, I provide labor and value in the world. So that's one. The second thing, it's expensive. And I think because it's expensive and people intuitively understand with CPA as well, I need really for the taxes or tax planning, think about kind of very event oriented. The same thing for lawyers, like, well, if I get a notice or I need to create a notice or review something, so to think about a more project basis, and it's very expensive on a project basis, right? Some of these attorneys can go over $1,000 an hour. So everybody's kind of okay with it. Yeah, this is a good idea. I really just need you for 5 hours or 15 hours. I don't need you for 40 hours every single week, which created a much easier flow for those professions to stay fractional even without calling them that. I think on tech, it's the exact opposite. Like the way the industry grew from the 80s and 90s, from like IT managers and software developers, and then the whole profession was created over time. A lot of the profession came from high growth technology companies, right? That's high technology, high tech, and in that context, they were running super fast in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. They still are, but back then it was like they were light years faster than any other industry. A lot of capital went in, and the working assumption was, yeah, we'll get the best minds, the brightest minds. We'll pay them much money, and they're going to concentrate their intellect, and we're going to get this result out of them. So that's how those professions were built. Those professions were built around choose a project and attack it. In contrast, marketing has been fragmented to marketing agencies for decades. Absolute decades. Like from early Edward Bernays public relations, after that started being a specialty that more people did, to Mad Men and what happened in America and with early advertising and television and radio and newspapers. So from that time, that already, again, that profession came up as saying, I can do this, but every company needs a quote unquote campaign. So I'm going to find a company that needs a campaign, and then I'm going to service them, and then I'm going to find another one and service them, but the campaign has a start and an end. Only years later it became this concept of well, I need a chief marketing officer. I need somebody to constantly do marketing. And even then, I think most of the universe is marketing agencies where you have leaders, marketing leaders in the company that are puppeting them, guiding them, have discernment, clarify the business goals, and are the voice of the business with the agency and are the voice of the agency within the business and so on. But even still in that market, it's highly fractional. Very rare to find a copywriter that works for a single company, a designer that works for a single company, a marketing manager that works for a single company. Most of the marketing work in the world is fractional. So I think with technology, the way the profession grew up in this very high demand environment where a lot of capital came, a lot of people focused their attention. Technology was built from scratch so it needed a lot of attention. Everything was complex. I remember, late 90s, to create a website took a goddamn while. It doesn't matter what tool you even if you were using Adobe released at the time Dreamweaver and Flash and all these things that try to make it easier. But if you wanted to create a good web page, you needed to code, and the simplest thing took a while. Even if you were fast, you're still measuring in 30 minutes to do something, which now with prompt and 5 seconds you have a full website. So the reality is the industry had pivoted over time, and as capabilities were abstracted, so things became easier. Right? When I needed to learn programming languages, it was from the DOS and Pascal and C and assembly and C++ before it came into all the modern languages. And as the languages became easier, it became more people were able to access and service it. Same thing with design. Now we have Figma and Canva and all these amazing tools. So you don't need to go to art school for 10 years to learn how to produce graphics. Things have become easier. And now in the age of AI, a lot of technology labor, because you can provide a lot of value with a simple website that does a little thing or an app. And in a world where you can prompt to a business or prompt to a product, you just don't need as much time. And when you don't need as much time, we get this economic efficiency of fractions.
And this plays out every day in the clients that you're working with. So part of the work that you do as a fractional CTO, part of what we do and share inside the CTOx Accelerator is you go in, you evaluate the team. And so as you're doing this and you're helping a founder reimagine your org chart, turnarounds are part of your specialty. How do you help them decide which functions can or should be fractional and which ones should remain in-house and part-time to full-time?
So I'm looking a lot at leverage and leadership and understanding what part needs to have leadership, what parts need to have management, and then what part needs to just have labor, like work, because things need to get produced, right? There needs to be a product that's created. So very common in my case, I'm more of an engineering-focused CTO. Some of the people in our program are like CIOs or CISOs. But in my universe, if I get hired, it's probably because somebody's trying to build something. And when they're trying to build, there are good best practices to build, meaning you need to make it up, which is product people. And maybe it's a product person, maybe it's a product team. And then you have the engineers that actually make it real. And once you understand you have that basic split, now you need to cater for the coordination. So how is information passing between business to product, product to engineering, engineering back to business? And so for me, I'm very, very big on Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. And I immediately try to think, okay, well, I don't want to have 30 direct reports. And in practice, in many companies I go to, there's, 20, 40, 50 people under my universe, right? And in the small to mid-sized business space. And I can't possibly manage, 40, 50 people times, 6 or 12 clients. So I really work on my direct reports. And my direct reports, I'm looking for a really great director of product, a really great director of engineering. Now, what makes them great is not necessarily because they've been in product for many years. Actually, it's very common for me to get into a company and identify someone that has the potential to lead product. Because I can teach product skills to anyone, right? But I can't teach like intimacy with the market and the business, right? Especially like established businesses, especially small to mid-sized, they have a lot of nuance, right? A lot of things to them. So I'd rather get somebody that's very smart and eager and teach them product skills and give them the environment where they can thrive as a product leader. Same thing with engineering. Now, engineering is a bit different because a great engineer is rarely a great engineering team leader. But because it's a different skill set. Creating code and testing code and shipping product on time is very different than managing humans. It's a completely different skill. The part of you that's still a coder when you're a team lead or you're a director or a VP is very small. It's basically in the, little odds and ends of conversation where a technical thing comes up and you're not even like, if you do your job well, you're not even the one to solve it, but you just have the kind of the bullshit radar and the ability to make sure that everybody's estimating correctly and they're honest with themselves. And so you can provide good representation back in the business on the business side. So if I get a good head of product and head of engineering, and then they build their teams under them. If it's, maybe we need one team, maybe we need three, maybe we need one guy. I don't know what it is, because that's a function of the dream, right? If we're trying to create, 50 different applications, we need a bunch of teams. If we really just have one thing, maybe we can have, a MacGyver with a knife between their teeth that's full stack and ready to go. So I try to build that. It's very common, actually, that I get also fractional directors of engineering and fractional directors of product. Product, not as common as it happened to be with engineering, because product needs to constantly like touch the material, right? They need to like know the customer, they need to know the applications, and if they need to be close to the metal, being part-time is not as helpful. But with engineering lead, they can be. What's nice about good engineering processes, good software development processes, if they have the right ceremonies or the right way information is handed off and the right way things are tested, you're really there to support the humans and you don't need to look at them, every single day. When it comes to individual contributors, it's a function of scope. So in our accelerator, we teach a functional technology framework, how to create projects that de-risk, unclog, and scale the company. And for different projects, we give it a name, give it a description, describe the ideal outcome of having accomplished this project, and the best result of getting it done. The worst result if we don't do it, in case it's not important. It's important to kind of scale. And then resources and time. Like this is going to take 6 weeks with Scrum Master, Project Manager, and so on. When we create a list of projects for every quarter, we look at the org chart of who are the humans and the systems that are required to accomplish the goal. And in that context, if we see that one position, maybe we need a part-time QA or a part-time project manager. Because when you roll up all the amount of projects and the amount of time it's going to take them, it just doesn't amount to full-time. So fairly common on the leadership that I still push for fractional. Like I'd rather get a super experienced fractional director of product or fractional director of engineering than a full-time one, because the leaders can do a really great job, not full-time. And but then on the individual contributor, it comes down to basically scope. Like what are we trying to do? Do we have the budget to do it?
Oof. So you talk about ceremonies, you talk about scope. What are some other signs and signals that would tell you that a company is trying to solve a full-time problem with part-time talent or vice versa?
Scope is definitely a big one. Well, I would say part of scope is what you're trying to do, and the second one is when you're trying to do it. So very common in companies where there's really good ideas, and the good ideas can come from anywhere. CEOs, the executives, the customers. And usually what I tell my partners in the companies is that when they come up with, if a VP or a C-level executive comes up with an idea, it's probably a good idea. So now there's less of a debate of if, right? But we go through some priority matrices and we make sure that, it's validated and There's kind of reasons to do it, cost benefit analysis, stuff like that. So it's probably not a bad idea. So we're not talking about the if as much, but we are talking about the when. And the when really dictates the throughput, right? Like, do we need to make this happen in a week? Do we need to make this happen in 6 months? Does it even need to exist? And then with that, there's always dependencies. Okay, good idea, but when should we do these 3 ideas before we do this? And we do this idea without doing those other 3. Not even like should, like do we need to build some kind of a building block? Good. So throughput and time constraints are very big determiners. Like if somebody is very patient and they're not stressed, then they get a cheaper result. This is the reality of it. We need less people because you can just rely on a smaller team, very easy to communicate, very easy to manage, and take your time. Build one feature at a time and go for it. There's an old adage in technology that what one developer can do in 1 month, 2 developers do in 2 months. And it's annoying and true, and everybody listening to this podcast will probably appreciate it and have seen it live. So there's a true cost to scale. The coordination cost is fairly significant. Now, if you need the volume, you need to run in multiple parallels. That's why we think about multiple teams that run in parallel, as opposed to one team that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think definitely when I get into organizations, just giving them a framework of priorities and not if, but when already streamlines decisions and make things easy and way less frustrations. Because end of the day, when the CEO has an idea and she comes up with something and she's like, I need this to happen, in 6 weeks. But then you explain, well, these are the 18 things that need to happen. So if you want to hit it in 6 weeks, no problem. We need to double the cost. Or we explain physics is a thing and we just can't do it. We cannot move enough atoms and bits in time for this to happen because of whatever depends. In many cases, it's, customers and systems and market and a bunch of other things. So scope and timing, and then introduce those variables to all the decision makers. So now they can operate in that mindset. And what I see mostly though, so that's certainly something I see where they want a lot done and they're not recognizing the throughput, meaning with looking at the resources, what can these resources do and what should they do as a function of a business result. Very often though, I see the opposite, which is we want to get a lot done and we have a 35-person engineering team and they can't get anything done. So part of I'm a hobby weightlifter. I lift heavy. And one of the most interesting lessons I had over the years is that if you want to grow bigger muscles, you need to lift less reps. So don't lift 10 or 12, lift 3 or 5 and rest longer. Like it's incredible to see even like master bodybuilders that go to, Arnold Open. They could get stuck for years in the same body and some because they work out 5 times a week and suddenly they reduce to 1 workout a week. They rest and the muscle grows. And in many cases, I can come to a company that has 35 engineers or 35 people on the technology team, trim it down to 10, and we get double the velocity because we win on coordination costs. And it's not because they necessarily had bad talent or lazy talent or any of that. It's just they're dying in coordination and the tasks are just not handing up. So that's also very common where people are actually, they don't overbuild, they oversubscribe on the resources.
Oof, some potent leadership wisdom in that riff. Thank you. Yeah, and it's so funny. It is paradoxical. We talk about it in the time management piece when we're coaching our CTOxs on how to manage multiple clients. And it's like doing less and actually taking what Dan Sullivan in Strategic Coach would call a free day, 24 full hours, no work. Paradoxically, you get more done than if you had just worked that day or did a half day or something. There's something magical that happens when we give ourselves the gift of rest and just make it part of our regular routine. Now, you share this killer line when it comes to our pitch training and how to frame fractional work. 100% of the outcome for a fraction of the cost. Why is that such an important reframe from a sales psychology, but also a relationship standpoint?
Yeah, for both sides, both for the client and for the CTO. One, in many cases, we have this conversation, like, how do you even explain to them that full-time is not necessary? Or on the client side, what do you mean you can do this with full-time? Like, let's stop talking about effort. What are you trying to do? What's the outcome? What is the thing you're trying to accomplish? Focus on that. Now, from a leader perspective, I'm trying to think, how many decisions do I need to make to get you that outcome? And then what are the resources required to actually produce the outcome? But for me as a leader, I'm making decisions. Like, how many decisions can I possibly make? Right? How much information do I need to integrate on a regular basis to accomplish whatever outcome? Now, once in a while, I certainly meet a business and I'm like, yep, too big. Can't do it. Fractional is not it. And it's too many decisions, too much information to integrate on the leadership side. Too much coordination. Full-time is the way to go. Also, from an ethical standpoint, I say this all the time. If you're a startup, right, that's building technology and selling technology, and you have investors, I recommend you have full-time. Why? Not because you necessarily, and I'm not talking about when the quote-unquote CTO is basically the coder of the company. So put that aside, because then it's just a title. It's not leadership, it's actually doing. Why? Because an investor or a group of investors gave you money. And if they give you money, I believe that your attention cycles need to be dedicated to them until they get a return. And it's not very fair to them that they're taking the risk with their money and you're deciding to draw your attention across multiple projects. So it's not a functional reason that I suggest fractional is not good. It's an ethical. But outside of that, most businesses are not technology startups, even though it's easy to get confused if you read the media. Most businesses are just normal businesses, and they're enabled by technology. They make their business better by technology. They manage costs better. They manage to make more money. They manage to control their time and so on. And in that context, being very outcome focused and not effort focused is what that phrase does. Let's talk about the outcome. I think I can deliver that outcome for a fraction of the cost. So don't look at the word fraction on my time, because it absolutely doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, by the way, that it's true, because we're focusing on the outcome, not the effort. That's what I said earlier. Like, a business doesn't want the result faster. Like, why would you want me to wait if I can give you the outcome? Now, in case I can't, in case I need to invest more time, then I'm willing, that does warrant like full time or something like that. Then of course, then please don't pitch it. But pitch it if you actually believe you can give them that result, given the resources the business can, warrant to the effort, and the plan, like what are they trying to do and when and so on. So that reframing helps both parties focus on results and not focus on effort, focus on output and not input. And really, really in the form of outcome, which is what nobody hires anybody for effort. They might price you on effort, which I don't think they should, but they don't hire you for effort. The reason they hire you because they want to get something done. So let's talk about the thing. Let's talk about the thing getting done. And then, surprise, somebody's willing to do it without billing you for work that's not contributing to that outcome, which is really what, this being another Zoom window, listening to people talk without making any decisions that could have been, done by a note taker, and you could have concentrated those decisions to 30 minutes a day.
Oh my gosh, you just dropped so many gems. I need to run that back. So let's go back. You're in a sales conversation or a pitch conversation with the CEO, and they say you've given them the fractional bit. You've talked about the frames of legal and financial, and then they still say, we want someone more embedded. What does that sound like when you reply?
For me, I say there's no difference between fractional and full-time. I have the same accountability, the same responsibility. In fact, when I go into clients, in many cases, the employees don't even know I'm fractional. Remember, I had this case where I'm with a client for a year, and I get a message on Teams with that particular client of somebody looking at my LinkedIn and said that I started consulting with other companies, and how's that going? I'm like, you're confused. You're one of those companies. They had no idea, because nothing in my presence made them feel like I'm not there. Nothing in my presence made them feel fractional. If I'm in a meeting, I'm in a meeting. If we're talking about something, I know what we're talking about. I am synchronized. I know the people, I know the projects, I know the status. There's just not as many that needs my full-time attention. And I like to work on multiple projects and context switch. So if you do it right, there's no difference between full-time or part-time in terms of, again, accountability or responsibility. It's all the same. It's because you're accountable and responsible for the same thing, you're expected to produce the result at the same level. If you're not producing the same level as full-time, if you're not producing the result at the same level, then economics come into play. Okay, can you find someone else or if you, the same person, would have done it full-time, would you have produced the result and so on? And that's an important debate, right? And that every business should look at that, and every CTO should look at that when they promise they can be a great fractional CTO. From our experience, though, now having worked with over 200 fractional CTOs and growing every month, that serve hundreds of businesses, it's just never the case. We have yet to see, correct me if I'm wrong, Marissa, somebody says, I got a contract and now they replace me with full-time.
No, that's not happened.
Yeah. Never happened to me personally, and I've been doing this for longer. It never happened to my colleagues, and certainly never happened to any members in the program. In fact, the opposite happens, because usually when a fractional CTO comes in, they come in because there is a mess. They come in because something is not working, right? Something is slow, something is expensive, something is not working, and they're making it better, faster, cheaper, and so on. So once you come in and you install the different systems in the business, then you're needed even less. Right? That's actually a modality we talk about in the program. Maybe you're starting off with what we call an engaged fractional CTO, 10, 12, 15,000 a month. But then 6 months, 9 months in, you're like, well, you don't need me as much. The systems are working. We can actually go down to even more fractional because the people are in place and the systems are in place. So we've never seen the opposite yet of somebody coming in and saying, nah, that didn't work out. They need more time. The business needs more time.
So beautiful. Lior, as we wrap today, what would you say to a founder who is hesitant about hiring fractional leadership? What do they need to hear that you haven't shared already in this episode?
I think all of these decisions, like hiring decisions in general, there's always a risk associated with them. I think the financial risk of fractional is way cheaper than the financial risk of full-time, like dramatically cheaper. It's usually, half, a third, a quarter, a fifth of what a full-time would be. In many cases, even more. So I think what the advantage of being able to tap into the right experience you need, right? If you're considering a fractional CTO, get somebody that you think, wow, they really understand what I'm trying to do. And they have the experience and they can create the result that I want. So if you're able to tap into all the experience, what we say in the program, we say all of the lessons and none of the scars. So if you find a CTO with the right lessons and they're willing to service you for a price that's way cheaper than the alternative, it's not just a cheaper price, it's also a simpler engagement. As opposed to like a W-2 employee that, they probably need to leave a job if they're a W-2, right? And onboarding them. And usually with the W-2, there's this little bit of a slog in terms of productivity, right? First 2 weeks, 4 weeks, I'm just kind of getting the lay of the land, where more like consultants are trying to give you a result quicker. Fractional CTO, you get the benefit of a leader, and they're trying to prove to you that they're amazing because they know they're not a W-2. They know you can just get the axe out and terminate their contract. So I think the advantage relative to the risk is dramatic and reliable. I think also it's very common for us to see it as a stopgap. Because if you're thinking about hiring a full-time CTO, that means you're stuck somewhere. You need decisions made, right? You need discernment. So get somebody with the discernment. Get somebody that's able to make a decision, that you trust to make a decision. And if you later want to replace them with a full-time, that's also your best pathway. It's by far a better pathway to bring someone like me in for a quarter or two, build up the position, the responsibilities, the processes, the team, whatever, and then for me to find you your full-time CTO than for you to find the full-time CTO. So it's a much better ramp to get the results that you're looking for. Much cheaper, faster, better, safer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lior. I just love these frames. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about a hot subject in our field, which is AI agents. And I'm so excited to have you riff on that. As always, I love our conversations, and I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
That wraps up another episode of the CTOx Podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you the tools and inspiration to advance your journey as a fractional CTO.
And don't forget, if you want more in-depth support or to connect with our community of fellow fractional CTOs, visit us at CTOx.com.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the CTOx Podcast.